Hi, everybody. This is Aaron. I wanted to make a recording to give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of the student craft talks, which we're starting next week. So I chose the poem Becoming a Horse by Ross Gay, which we looked at a while back, and just thought I'd give you an example of what a craft talk might sound like. If you look back at the syllabus, you can see the assignment. Basically, you're going to do three things to get us started talking about this poem and then open it up for the class discussion. First is you're going to talk about what you love. Second, you're going to comment on how the poem is constructed. And third, you'll share an idea or two related to how this adds to our understanding of the language of illness or talks to some of the other texts that we've read. I also invite you to suggest a writing prompt that's inspired by or related to the poem that you have introduced. So let's go to Becoming a Horse. So the first thing you're going to do in your craft talk is you're going to read the piece out loud for us and try to read in a slow and clear way. This is Becoming a Horse by Ross Gay. It was dragging my hands along its belly, loosing the bit and wiping the spit from its mouth, that made me a snatch of grass in the thing's maw, a fly tasting its ear. It was touching my nose to his, that made me know the clovers bloom, my wet eye to his, that made me know the long field's secrets. But it was putting my heart to the horses, that made me know the sorrow of horses, made me forsake my thumbs for the sheen of unshod hooves, and in this way drop my torches, and in this way drop my knives. Feel the small song in my chest swell, and my coat glisten and twitch, and my face grow long, and these words cast off at last for the slow, honest tongue of horses. And, you know, if you notice, I tried to read that in the way that I hear it in my head. And so I was not stopping at the end of some lines because the expression was continuing, and yet I was making pauses in other places because I really wanted the words to sink in. And one of the things I love about this poem are the words. So now I'm answering number one. Just some great words here, like the bit that the horse holds in its mouth, very specific terminology, and the word maw, which is like a mouth. And I love the word unshod, and I love the words glisten and twitch. So these are just some great words that are here in this poem, and that's a great place for you to start when talking about what you love. I also love some of the sounds of this poem, and I tried to read it in order to emphasize the sounds. Loosing the bit and wiping the spit. I really enjoyed those sharp, clear rhyme. Um, I also love this, the clovers bloom. I love that bloom right there in the middle of the line. And I didn't realize it when I read it with my eyes, but when I was reading it out loud, that touching my nose also is rhyming and kind of playing with this no at the end of that line. And let's see. Oh, this one, the sheen of unshod hooves was just so cool to say it out loud. Go ahead, say it with me. The sheen of unshod hooves. I love this repetition here with and in this way, and in this way, and my face, and these words. I feel like there's almost a falling with this repetition. I mean, here's the dropping, the elongating of a face. There's just this feeling of kind of release that's happening as this poem comes to its conclusion. And the words and the sounds are contributing to that. There's lovely imagery in this poem too. I mean, I can really feel it with my senses. Touching your fingers in the mouth of the horse, I can feel that wet, warm feeling, and imagine my nose pressed to a horse's nose, or wet eyes, um, even pressing one's heart to the horse's heart has that very tactile feeling. Um, and I think this imagery with the small song in my chest, um, it's a beautiful metaphor. I'm not even entirely sure what it is, but I love the idea that each of us has a song in our chest, even a small song that during the rush of days we forget to listen to. Um, and yet, in moments of connection or in moments of art, we feel it again, and it can swell inside us, become a symphony. So all of these are really strong for me. Maybe the strongest is this line about my face growing long, thinking about a horse's face being long. And this is the shortest line of the entire poem. Um, and then, of course, this final line, this idea that letting go of words and coming almost into a silence in these final two lines. But it's a silence of honesty, and it's a slower pace of language, the slow, honest tongue of horses. Do horses have a language? Sure. Uh, I don't know. It's a wordless language. It feels ancient and it feels honest. And it's a beautiful and also kind of surprising ending for a poet who works in words to kind of want to release from words, kind of want some liberation from the words that try to define or try to categorize experience. That's one of the things that poetry does, is that it creates this experience for us, and this made version of experience, as Mark Doty said. And so I feel like Rosquet is writing himself into the horse's point of view, the horse's emotion, and even the horse's wordlessness. And he's doing it through words, which is just such a cool thing to do. That's me talking about what I love. And I gushed a bit because I love this poem. The second question is, how is this poem constructed? And, start with something really simple. It's 18 lines long. The lines are fairly short. There's just a handful of words in each line. There are no stanza breaks. It's all one piece, which I feel contributes to just this journey that you travel on as you go through it. There's not a lot of pauses or breaks. In terms of the ideas of how it's constructed, it's kind of constructed with how. How did Rosquet become close to the horse? How did he become close to the horse? How did he understand something deeper about horses? And then how did he actually become a horse? What is this transformation that takes place toward the end? I also noticed that there are some examples of caesura, which is when there's a pause in the middle of the line. And if you haven't tried doing this in your writing, I recommend it. It's a nice way to slow your reader down. And then when you have enjambment where the line continues onto the next line, it's a nice way to accelerate your reader forward. And so Rosquet has a nice balance of this in the poem, so that he's both slowing us down and moving us forward. He's controlling the pace of this poem. There's also some nice line breaks here. that leave us with a very short fragment of an idea. I just love this "made me." It seems to highlight that there's a making or a remaking happening in this poem, even though the other idea continues on to the next line, "made me forsake." But just sticking "made me" here highlights that for me, just a little extra time as I read through. So finally, question number 3 is, what does this add to the language of illness? And this is not necessarily a poem about illness. However, I feel it is a poem about empathy, and the way that art, and specifically poetry, can help us access what it is to be someone we're not, what it is to see or smell or feel or hear or taste through someone else's perspectives. Those 5 senses that transport us into someone else's shoes. So as we're becoming a horse, we're becoming something that's other from us, something that's different from us, and that is represented by a horse in this poem. But it could also be anyone, could be a patient, could be a doctor, could be someone from another political perspective. And it's through language and it's through these 5 senses that we are able to kind of drop our expectations and drop our kind of our preconceived notions, which can be like torches or be like knives, and step inside their point of view. I also think it relates to the language of illness, because the language of illness encourages us to use all of our languages. And in a way, this is such a gorgeous construction of language, some wonderful words and imagery, and it just has a very healthy beauty to it, and emotion at its soul. So, yeah, there's my craft talk on becoming a horse. I just put this together right now to give you an example, and you're going to have time to put yours together. But that's all you're doing. You're just responding to these 3 questions, and then we'll open it up for the other classmates to get their perspectives heard. We're going to be looking at 7 of these per class. So we're looking at your craft talk being about 4 or 5 minutes long. I've definitely gone longer than that at this point. I wasn't watching the time. And then opening it up for discussion. I also put in this note about suggesting a writing prompt that's related to the poem or text. If this is something that comes to you, great, do it. If it's too hard to figure out, that's okay too. For me, I'm always just getting ideas when I read. And so when I read this poem about seeing through someone else's perspective, my prompt that I would give you is write your own poem that uses the 5 senses to transform the speaker into some other thing or some other person or some other animal. And as you write it, keep the lines short, and go ahead and break the line off at some cool key words. If you've got a great word like belly or spit or maw, you can stick that out at the end of the line and keep writing the sentence on to the next line. And then go ahead and give yourself some pauses in the middle of those lines so that you're playing with structure, you're playing with the reader's pace as they go through. Thanks for listening, everybody.